Hi everyone, this is Studio X, and today in this tutorial we will be learning how to add blood hits, muzzle flashes, and bullet trails to your action footage. So as you can see in this video, there's a lot of effects going on, including tracking. I will go through each effect in detail so you can learn how to put all of these together and make your footage look great. So let's hop right in. So here I have the footage that you just saw, which is just some actors, and this is from Connor Lanhauser's film Pop Pop, and I'm the visual effect supervisor for this film. So basically in this shot you can see everyone shoot some guns and then they get hit by the character that is off the screen. So what I'm going to do is move the footage into a folder called In Progress, and that's just to keep all of the footage and files that I'm working with very categorized. That way I know which ones are complete, which ones still need to be done, and things that are currently in progress. Then I'm going to take this clip and throw it in this icon over here to make a new composition. And I will use all the settings from the clip, so you'll get the correct frame rate and size and everything. That way there are no issues going forward from here. So now I'm going to look through this clip, see if there's anything too crazy going on that's gonna mess up our motion track. I think it'll be fine, and After Effects software should probably figure out which are actors, so I'm not even gonna worry about masking, especially in a shot where I'm not really placing text or replacing banners or anything. This is everything that's going on here is like really quick, so it's like bullet flying and some color corrected smoke that's gonna look like blood hits. So it's like very little things that are just piled on top of each other. So I'm just gonna use a track camera option in the tracker, and if you can't find it, you can just go into Window and Tracker, and you'll just find it there. And it's just gonna analyze the footage and try to figure out the way that the camera was moving, and you'll be able to get points and make some nulls and use that for different elements. So I'm just gonna wait for this to process and we'll be right back. Okay, so we just got our result. So I'm going to see the tracking points over here, and yeah, so that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to hit create camera and it'll make a camera for us. Next thing I'm going to do is find the points where I'm going to be placing the smoke and bullets and stuff like that. So usually it's just going to be around the people, so it doesn't need to be super specific, but as you can see this is exactly on the guy. So I'm just going to right click and hit create null, and I'm going to call this right guy 1 or just right guy. Go back here, click on the 3D camera tracker, that way you can continue clicking on points, and I'll find another section right here or somewhere on the body just so I know that it's very specific. Perfect, create null, and I'm gonna call this center guy. Then go back here once again and just do it for all the points where you're planning to put in some kind of elements. Okay, so now we have all of our points, and let's start bringing in some elements. So I use the Action Essentials 2, and I have them imported here in the effects. So I have some shells, muzzle flashes, blood smoke hits, blood hits, and cork hits, so in case if it like hits the ground or something. So I'm just gonna put in the muzzle flashes right now on these because they're just 1 frame long, so it's perfect and they don't even need any tracking unless you see some smoke on them. So let's see, so none of them are they don't have any suppressors on them, so I'm not going to be using the suppressed fire. I'm just going to find some visually appealing looking flashes here. This one looks pretty good, so I'm going to go and play it through and find a time where it looks like he gets recoil. So it looks like there's a flash over here, so I'm just going to take this muzzle flash, bring it into our timeline, and drop it right when he fires. So now I'm just going to need to rotate it 180 degrees, and I'm going to take the pan behind tool and align it to where the actual flash happens. Then I'm going to bring it over to the end of the gun. The sizing looks alright, the sizing looks pretty good. And I'm just going to hit R on the keyboard and just rotate it to align it more to the actual gun. So that's looking pretty good. I'm going to make it 3D and find the R guy on the right, so right here, right guy, and this is where our position is. So I'm just going to hit P, copy the position, go to my muzzle flash, go to P and click on position and paste it. And next I'm just going to bring it up in the Y axis, and then I'm going to bring it in the X axis. So now it's in a very general area, so it's kind of in the same Z depth as the actor himself. So if there's any smoke after the muzzle flash, it just stays with the camera motion. So that looks perfect. So let's hit save. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the lighting onto the guy because he does fire, so there's a really bright flash of light. So he's going to need some kind of brightness on him. So to do that, I'm going to go to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer, and I'm going to hit Enter and call it Right Guy Exposure. So now what I'm going to do is get the pen tool and just kind of get a general area of him. It doesn't need to be super precise because it's going to be very feathered because it is not a harsh light. We're just using it to make a very, very bright spot on him. So, and I'm only getting the front because it is what's in the front, so the back over here is probably going to be more in the shadow than anything else. So just select this area here, and I'm going to move it to where the first flash happens. That way I can just keep track of the timing of different layers without, going through hitting like U to see keyframes or anything like that. So now I'm going to go to Effect and Presets and type in Exposure, and I'm going to drag it over, and let's take a look at his face, and let's look at the brightness of the light. So as you can see, it's in, if you see these numbers over here, they tell you the different levels of the colors. So like the sky is around 190 to 200, his face is like 60, 80, somewhere on there. His like actual face is a lot brighter, it's like also 180, so kind of exposed, similar to the sky. And if you're looking at the flash, it is completely overexposed. It's all 255, and some other parts of it are about 200. So I'm going to keep exposing his face until it meets like the back sections of the flash. So you can see it's at around 200. So now let's look at his face. The bright spots, yeah, so these are starting to get really overexposed, and his fingers are overexposed as well. But I think I can push it a little bit more. Yeah, that is looking pretty good. So I'm going to turn off the mask so you can see what we're looking at. And it's very harsh because we don't have any feathering on our mask. So now what I'm going to do is just hit MM on the keyboard to bring out the mask properties. And I can just pull up the feathering just slightly. So 120, I'm working with 4K footage, so if you're working with 1080p and this is the similar size of a guy in your frame, you'd probably have to half it. So around like 60, 70 should be fine. So as you can see now, it literally looks like he's being flashed by this light right here. Bam. So that's looking nice. Now what we're going to do is we're going to need to keyframe this brightness. So I'm just going to hit the keyframe and exposure. And I'm going to hit U on my layer so I can bring up this keyframe. And I'm just going to go 3 frames so the brightness kind of slowly goes down. So 1, 2, 3. And I'm just going to hit 0. Perfect. So now if you look at it, you're going to see that there's a flash and it kind of stays on him for a little bit. That is looking great. Perfect. Now let's add a bullet trail flying out when he fires. So to do that, I'm just going to make a new composition and I'm going to call it new bullet trail. And I'm going to make it 3000 pixels wide and 500 pixels in height, and just hit OK. So now you see we have a very long composition here, and that's because we could use it in case if we have a shot that's farther away. So like over here, you can see we have some actors in the back, so when they're firing, we'll have this extra space, so we can just reuse the same bullet trail in all of our clips instead of making 20 different custom ones, but they're all going to basically look the same because there'll be like 4 frames in the entire shot. So now I'm going to go to layer, new, solid, and I'm going to make a solid that would be similar to a color of a bullet. So kind of like darker faded orange, or kind of like yellowish. This looks pretty good, and I'm just gonna hit OK. And now you can just draw a shape of a bullet. So as you know, just the back section right here, and a section over here, curved edge, and then this section here. So very rough, but let's just fix it up a little bit, make it a little longer as well. That's looking pretty good. Maybe you'll actually give it a ramp. So type in ramp, choose gradient ramp, apply it to your bullet, and where it says start of ramp, I'm just gonna hit this little icon here so I can choose the back, and then I'll choose the front over here, and I could make different colors, so the back could be a little darker. There we go. And I'm just going to choose the same for the end color, except now I'm going to go into it and just make it a little bit brighter. And let's make the back even darker. Perfect. So that's looking nice. Now what we're going to do is we're going to need to animate the bullet flying. So I'm just going to hit P, and I'm going to rename this bullet, even though this is the only thing in the composition. But it's going to fly maybe 20 frames, if not faster, yeah, maybe 15 frames. So I'm just going to hit position here, and I'm going to go to the beginning and just slide the X position over here. Or actually, I'm going to keep it in the very beginning just so we can see the bullet as it's flying out. And let's go to the end and make this fly out of frame. Perfect. So let me crop the length of the entire clip to 30 frames. And trim the work area. So now let's see it. So that is definitely flying very slow. So let's make it 8 frames long. And now what you're going to need to do is enable motion blur, and yeah, blur the bullet. So now I'll enable the motion blur on this layer. The only thing that you can see here now is I'm going to go to full quality. So you can see the edges are very sharp on the top, and I don't want that, so I'm going to go into my mask property. So once again, hit MM, and I'm just going to feather it by like 6 pixels, so you just get a nicer edge here. I'm going to save the project, and let's look at the timing of this bullet. So it still looks really slow. I'm actually just going to make the bullet smaller, and that should solve our problem. So I'm just going to go into mask expansion and make it smaller. Or actually, I'm just going to select this entire mask right here, double click it, hold Option and Shift, and make a smaller bullet. Perfect. So here's our small bullet, and it's just flying all the way out. So that should look a lot better, and let's hope that the speed is okay. Maybe I'll just make it 6 frames long, because bullets do fly fast. Okay, perfect. So let's go back into our composition here and go into the project, and we have a new bullet trail over here. It's accidentally in the wrong place. I'm just gonna throw it generally into the effects. Okay, perfect. So now when the explosion here happens, I'm going to take the bullet trail and place it here so it's timed perfectly. I'm going to take the pan behind tool and align it to where the back of the bullet is. I'm going to make it a 3D layer, go into the muzzle flash and copy the position because it's going to be in the exact same position. I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to rotate it as much as the muzzle flash as well. So in the rotation it's 171, so I'm going to go into the rotation here. It was Z rotation, and paste it. And this is going to go under our muzzle flash and under the exposure as well. So if I hide the muzzle flash, you can see the bullet is right here about to fly out, and yeah, there it is flying through. So let's enable the flash and bring this down, and let's check this out. Perfect. So as you can see, he gets hit. I mean, the bullet flies out, he doesn't get hit. I'm gonna uncheck render track points because now we don't need it at this point. Looks great. So now you're gonna need to mess around with the look of the muzzle flash here, and basically the problem that I see is this is really overexposed, and it kind of doesn't blend with anything. So go to toggle switches and modes and choose screen. So now you can, instead of seeing just this dark edge around it, which really makes it stand out and literally looks like you just put a PNG image into your video, go to screen. So now it starts exposing the characters behind him as well. And I'm going to put an effect levels and apply it to the muzzle flash. So now I'm going to try to color correct match it to the scene, because I can see there's a lot of green and lots of yellows and not as many reds, and this muzzle flash is mostly red. So click on this over here to go into the RGB channels, and you can go into each individual one to see the specific range. So I'm gonna go to the red channel, and in my levels I'm going to go to my red channel as well. And I can see that there isn't really that many bright things in my scene that are very intense in red, except for, you know, the correction that we did on our character here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take it and just make it a little less intense. So as you can see now, it's matching a little better. let's go into our green channel. And you can see it's also very, very intense. So I'm just gonna bring it down just a little bit. So basically it's like, imagine working with every layer as if you're trying to color correct a black and white photo to try to make it blend in. So, and the blue one, it actually looks pretty good. Just a slight correction. And now let's go into our RGB and see how it looks. Yeah, this is way, way nicer color than what we had before. As you can see, it's really looking a lot nicer. So now what we need to do is, because it's a very bright flash and the colors are looking a lot better now, you can just copy and paste this layer on top, and we are going to type in fast blur and apply it to this new layer. And I'm going to start naming these compositions. So this one is flash guy right, and this is going to be flash guy right blur 1, and I'm going to make this around 260 pixels, so you can see it really brightens it up. And I'm going to go into T for opacity and make it 50%. And then I'm going to copy and paste this, and I'm going to call this front or flash guy right blur highlight. So this is going to be our little highlight light. So I'm going to make it around 60 pixels, and I'm going to go into the intensity of it, so into the opacity, and make it around 30%. So as you can see, this is how it looked without it, and this is how it looks with it. So that is looking pretty good. Next thing we are going to need to do is to add some smoke coming out of the gun once he fired, you know, the bullet here. So, and that's going to be really easy to make, and you don't even need any plugins for it, and you don't even need any effects. So to do that, you can just go into layer, new, solid, and make it comp size. And I'm going to call it flash guy, or no, guy right smoke, and just gonna make it black and hit OK. And I'm gonna bring this down under the flash and right under the trail as well. So we are going to go into effect, simulation, particle world, and we're going to go into our physics, and instead of explosive, it's going to be fire. We are going to bring it all the way to the beginning here, and right click on it, time stretch 500, and that's basically to make the gravity a lot slower without actually going and messing with the settings here. And I'm just gonna bring this out, and just so I can start seeing the fire, and I'm gonna solo the fire, and I'm gonna solo the actual footage so I can see what I'm working with. So don't forget to save your project very often in case of the program crashes for some reason. And let's go and play with our particles. So instead of line, no one ever uses line. I use triangle sometimes, but I don't think anybody uses line or star. We are going to go into faded sphere, and we are going to map the colors so the birth color can be a decently bright gray, and the death color, it's going to be a lot darker gray. Then we are going to use the mode multiply, so maybe we can actually use much brighter colors. There we go. And I'm gonna move our producer to the gun just so I can see what is actually going on. And in our producer settings, we are gonna make the radius really small, so it's going to be 0.01, 0.01, and 0.01. Perfect. So let's continue pulling this through and see how this is looking. So it's going up a lot, and what I think we're going to do is we're going to pull down the extra angle, and we're just going to play with these settings just to try to give it a interesting look. So maybe give it some resistance, just some slight resistance. So now we can start putting in a bigger birth rate. So let's give it something like 10. And another thing that we can start doing is adding a turbulent displace to it. So that's going to give us a different variation in the shape. So instead of just looking like normal spheres, it's going to be more displaced basically. So before I do that, I'm going to finish getting the sizing correct here. So let's go back to colors, and I just want to make it a little bit darker because I can always go and pull down the opacity, you know, of the layer. So you can see these are the settings I'm using. I'm just gonna decrease the birth size and the depth size to 0.1 and 0.1. That way we can just add a lot more particles and give it a lot more definition. They're just having a bunch of faded spheres, so the more you have, the more, you know, the more detailed it looks. So now let's go into, let's pull this forward in time just so we can start seeing how it looks. And let's turn on the turbulent displace, and it's looking very spherical because our complexity isn't turned up that high. So I'm going to turn that up to 5, and that's looking interesting, but I'm going to turn that up to maybe 8. Yeah, so that's looking a lot more interesting, but it's very intense. So let's bring down the sizing of it. This is actually looking pretty interesting, and the amount. So you can see now it looks like it's kind of going through the air, and it's having an interesting look on the way that it looks. So it's very intense. We're going to go into T for opacity, bring it down to 30%, just so it's very slight, maybe like 50 even. Yeah, 50 looks good. And next thing we're going to do is just some simple keyframing, because after you fire the gun, it, you know, there's not too much smoke coming out. It's not like shooting a freaking rocket launcher. So I'm just going to go into the position keyframes of position X and Y, because I don't really care about the Z. And I'm going to hit U so I can see all these keyframes. And I have it keyframed over here. And I'm just going to go like 3 frames forward, and I'm just going to move it over to over here. And just go through each frame and try to get it as closely aligned to the gun as you can. It doesn't have to be perfect because it is particles and the entire scene is fast. No one's going to be peeking at your pixels, zooming in, and seeing if you got it perfectly aligned, you know. That looks amazing. Now what we're going to need to do is go into and keyframe the birth rate. So I'm gonna do like 30 in the beginning, and I'm gonna keyframe it. And he's just shooting his gun, whatever, shooting his gun a bunch. So now that we have all these particles going on with the turbulent displace, I'm actually going to go back to the first keyframe where I have the birth rate, and I'm going to turn that up even more, so it's at 30. Maybe I'll even do 60. And then closer to the end, when he basically falls down, I'm going to tune it down to, by the end, it's just going to go to 0. And I'm going to decrease its lifespan, so it's like, why are they still here, you know? So the the longevity could be like 0.4 or like 0.2. Yeah, 0.18. Yeah, that's looking a lot nicer. So let's play it back with our blending mode set to normal, just so I can see exactly how they're looking and interacting. So from what I learned doing lots of particle stuff is visually, even when it's supposed to match up, your eyes don't really catch the motion, so it kind of looks like it's always a frame off. So I usually just take my entire composition, bump it a frame back, and now you can see that it matches up with the gun. So the biggest thing now is all the motion, you know, has a lot of blurring going on, and it's like motion blur, and there's a depth of field and everything. So you can use this plugin here called Futuristic, or it's like nobody can pronounce it correctly ever. But you can use that to make it look like it's out of focus, or you can just use a normal lens blur. But I'm going to use this plugin, and I'm going to go into the iris settings, make it 9 blades, and rounded facets of 0.8, and I'm just going to give it like a small blur, like 2, maybe like 3. Let's go into full settings so we can see everything. Yeah, so the setting of 2 looks pretty good. Displacement looks great. I'm going to go into my blending mode, make it multiply. So now we have this smoke right here coming out of the gun. You can also go through a bunch of the different settings, see if like maybe soft light would work better, or if hard light would work better. Anything that you think looks great. I think hard light looks pretty good. So that looks kind of nice. Let's go back to the first couple of frames and see how those look. Great, that is looking nice. That's some interesting looking smoke here. I might actually even bump up the birth rate even more and turn the size down. So I'm just gonna go into quarter quality like I always do because I'm recording, so it's like impossible to work with. I'm gonna turn up the birth size to 120, so I'm basically doubling it, and then I'm going to go into the size and make it, right now it's 0.1, so I don't want to divide it by half because I'll still get the exact same look. I'm just gonna go to 0.07 for birth size and 0.07 as well for the death size. So I'm just gonna go halfway through and see how that looks. Yeah, so we're getting a little more definition here. And it's following the gun as it's falling down. Now let's add some motion blur to this. So you can just go and enable motion blur for the entire composition, and in the guy right smoke you can enable the motion blur for this layer. So now you see we're getting this even wispier smoke going on from all this action. So, and once you add all the effects together, once you see everyone's firing, all these bullets flying around, it's gonna give it a whole different look. So let's check that out. Let's turn on everything and see how that's looking. So the only thing I see now is that this is really exposed. So I'm gonna go into this exposure. Instead of making it 1.6, let's make it 1. That's looking a lot more natural, and I might blur it a little more. So I'm gonna go into my mask, and instead of 120, I'll make it 150. That's looking pretty good. Now there's a bullet flying out, as you can see here, and I want to make a trail behind it that displaces the air. So, and in order to do that, I'm going to duplicate the bullet trail. I'm going to pre-compose it. I'm going to go to layer, pre-compose, move all attributes, make sure this is selected because you want to make sure that it frames it in the exact same way that that is framed. And I'm just going to hit OK. So now basically you see that it's the exact same bullet right here. We're just gonna need to copy the camera, that way it, you know, follows all the same things. So I'm gonna paste the camera, and now you can see that when I go back here, this new bullet trail is in the exact same position. So I'm gonna go and rename this layer to bullet trail displacement. Perfect. And what this is gonna do is you're gonna echo it, and we're gonna use this layer to displace everything else. So I'm gonna move it all the way up to the top because I don't want any other layers affecting it, and I can just turn it off because we don't really need it right now. Next thing I'm going to do is go to layer, new, adjustment layer, and I'm gonna call this bullet displacement. And I'm gonna make sure to put it under everything, so just above the footage. Next thing, you go to effect and preset, and you can start typing in displacement, and you'll find displacement map. Apply this effect over here, and choose the bullet trail displacement as the layer that you're looking for. So, and if you zoom in to where the bullet is, and we can just choose for horizontal and vertical displacement, we can just use red. And if you start moving it, you can see that it's displacing it very, very weirdly, right? It just follows exactly the bullet and just that shape. So if you don't want that, if you want it to be ripping through the entire trail from behind the gun. So in order to do that and not make it super round and normal, we're going to go into our bullet trail comp right here. And it's very simple. You just go to it and you type in echo and place it on. And our thing is very, very fast. Our bullet flies really fast, so the echo time, you're gonna need to decrease that. It's at 0.33, like 0.0333. Let's just make it 0.01. So you can see the bullet is really, really close. You can actually half of that, so 0.005. Perfect. And instead of add, do screen and give it a decay as well, so it's gonna be decaying back. Instead of number of echoes 1, as if you see, you can start putting it up and it extends the trail out. So I usually use 12 for bullet displacements because they usually are pretty long without being too much. And if you want to play with the length of it after that, you can just, play with the numbers. Instead of 005, you can make it 0006. And now you're getting some interesting ridges over here, which are going to look a lot more interesting in your actual displacement. It's going to start looking like the Matrix, Next thing I want to do is I want to actually give it some noise, and I'm going to use fractal noise to give it a texture. So I'm going to apply it to the top, and you can see that now you're getting this weird texture right on top of it. And what that is going to do is, because it's different values, and I'm actually going to give it more contrast, because it's different values, it's going to be ripping through the air in different ways. So now you can see it's a different looking texture here. It's very, very effective right now, and I don't want that to be so strong. So in order to make it less noticeable, you can just apply fast blur. So bring it over to the effect and just start bringing it up, but apply it before the fractal noise. That way you can still get the definition from the fractal noise. So I'm gonna bring it up, and let's go back to our comp. And yeah, so that is looking a lot more interesting right here, and it doesn't affect it as crazy. And if you just pull it through, you can see that when the bullet goes away, the trailing goes away. So I'm actually going to go back to the number of echoes and maybe double it. So now it's 24, and decrease the decay. Maybe even make it 30. Let's go all out. Perfect. That looks like a very nice looking bullet trail we have over here. Bullet flies out and rips through the air. So let's check this out. Bullet flies out and rips through the air. Looks great. You're making movies out here. So next thing you'd want to do is just play through it and see what feels off. And the first thing I see is the smoke just blinds me. Like, what is that? So I'm just gonna go into my smoke layer that I have here, which is the guy right smoke, and I'm gonna turn down the opacity a lot more to 30, maybe even 25. Yeah, so now it doesn't catch my attention as much, but you know it's there, you notice that it's there, and it just doesn't fly into your eyes as crazy. Another thing I'll do is I'll actually once again, like, this big ball of smoke is a little too much, so by the time the guy is falling I want it to be kind of gone. So you can once again go into the longevity and just start playing with the settings. That is looking nice. So once you learn how to add all these effects, all it takes after that is just applying it to all the other characters and just trying to match the look. Everything is looking good. I'm going to add more muzzle flashes for when he fires the gun. Okay, so let's add another muzzle flash, and then let's add some bullet hits as well as a bullet flying towards the actor. So there we go. Now we have another really bright flash happening at the camera, and let's add another bullet flying out. So I can just copy the exact same bullet trail, paste it, move it in time to match with the gun, and also align it with the barrel. And because we already have the displacement layer, we can just copy the bullet trail that we just put and go into our comp where we have the echo. So now it matches, and you can just take all the effects that you took from the first bullet trail and paste it on the second one. So now you just added a second bullet trail with barely any work. So now you can see it shows up right after he fires it as well. So that's looking great. And we already have the smoke from the gun showing up, and now it's not even a lot of work. Next thing we need to do is have the guy get hit by the bullet. Let's see where he gets hit. Okay, we don't really know, but I'm going to assume he's falling straight down, and kind of lets go of his hand. So I'm gonna have him get hit in the shoulder. I feel like that's a pretty good spot. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna copy this bullet trail that we have. Once again, paste it. And what I'm going to do now is rotate it backwards. So have it fly at him. So I'm just going to make it 0, so it's flying towards the person. And I'm going to move it all the way back and get my pan behind tool. And align it to where the end of the bullet happens. So this seems like this is where the bullet hits. So I'm just gonna put this position here, and now we can rotate and move it in any way that we want. So in this case, because I want him to get hit on the shoulder, so that's actually perfect timing. So now as soon as the bullet hits, right here, I'm going to add a blood splash, which the director wanted like a Freddy W inspired, where it's like a smoke powder hit that's been color corrected to be red, to be like blood. That looks like a really nice one. I think I'm gonna go with this, so I'm just gonna take it, bring it on top of all of this, And once again, I can just make it a 3D layer. So this is the bullet trail that hits him. I'm gonna copy the position, go to the powder hit, and paste the position there. So now you can see that exactly where it hits, that's where we have our blood hit. And because it is in 3D space, when the camera moves, it stays in the air. So now I'm just going to go into tint, bring a tint here, and I'm gonna tint everything red. Dark, bloody red. So this deep blood red looks pretty good. And right when the bullet hits, I'm actually going to scale it up. So as soon as it hits, it's very small. And then as it explodes, I'll make it 120. It's right in the camera, and we can actually add some motion blur to this shot as well. Boom. Explodes. And I'm gonna right click on the last keyframe and make it easy ease. That way it smoothly goes into our thing and the camera moves through the blood here. So the only things I'm gonna fix is just some timing issues, like the smoke now disappears way too quickly. So now it's just about trying to find the right timing for everything. So basically this is everything that is needed in this shot. You know, some bullet hits and bullets flying out, muzzle flashes, some smoke elements, some brightness on the shooting. And talking about the brightness on the shooting, I will actually need to add more because there's more shots here. So I'm gonna hit U, and it's right here, the exposure. So U, and right when he fires again, I'm going to bring it up. So I think it was at 1 before, yep. And bring it to 1, and then again 3 frames later it goes back to 0. And I'm just gonna need to adjust the mask here. So I'm just gonna hit M on the mask, and I'm just gonna keyframe it here for before, and then for this I'm just gonna move it and just generally align it. Once again, it doesn't need to be perfect. These are really quick flashes. So boom, U, and exposure. Just bring it 1 frame back. Perfect. Looks great. So I hope this tutorial was helpful and you learned some new stuff. If you have any questions or you got lost in this tutorial, you can comment below. I'll try to help you out. If you have any requests for any future tutorials, make sure to leave a comment down below and I'll try to cover any techniques or effects that you're looking to make. And if you're not subscribed to this channel, be sure to hit subscribe to learn and get notified anytime I make new videos. I will be making a couple of new videos relating to actual cinematography and photography, so be on the lookout for that. Thank you for watching. This has been Studio X, and I'll see you in the next one.